Welcome back everyone to yet another episode of Redstone with Ripper. This is episode 10, yep. We made it to 10 episodes, which I'm very, very happy about. And just to commemorate that fact, I guess, we're going to do a special double episode. Yes, we're going to cover two different things in this episode. And I say we're going to cover two different things because mostly they're kind of littler things that I wouldn't dedicate an entire episode to, but I still think they're very, very important to Redstone in general, and those things are clocks, which you see on your left here, and edge triggers, which you see on your right, and we're going to get straight into it. Okay guys, so we're going to start today with clocks, and admittedly, I think I should have covered these a couple of episodes earlier at least, but I'm going to be honest, I totally forgot about clocks. They're a very, very basic and fairly integral part of Redstone, and I thought I finally should cover them, and I thought this was a good enough opportunity while I was covering edge triggers in the same episode. So clocks, what are clocks? Well, as the name suggests, they are a repeating redstone circuit. Basically all clocks are, and all they enable you to do is enable a cycling redstone pulse. So I'll show you what I mean. So what we have here is an absolute classic design. If you were doing redstone about 2, maybe even 3 years ago ish, almost 3 years ago, before repeaters were in the game, you would recognize this design. It is called a 5 clock. This was the premier, the cutting edge redstone clock design back in the day, and I must admit I did use this design on more than one occasion before these things were introduced into the game. In fact, this is called a 5 clock. All it does is you complete the clock. So what it is, it's called a 5 clock because it has 5 redstone torches in sequence connected to one another. We're getting a bit of lag here. Must be all the redstone devices running. So that's the reason why it's called a 5 clock. 5 torches, and you can see we have got a cycling redstone pulse. It's fairly slow. The reason why we use 5 redstone torches and not, say, 2, 3, 4 is because you need an odd number of torches or it will not cycle. Go try it out yourself. If you have 2 torches like this, it's an RS NOR latch. And actually, if you have 4 torches like this, it's just another RS NOR latch. You actually need the odd number. If you use 3 torches, the torches go too fast and actually burn themselves out. So hence the reason for 5 clock. You can take an output out of any of, not any of these. Usually you take it out of the blocks, wouldn't you? I think I may have I messed this up? Where's this messed up? It seems to have, okay. It's a bit weird. Glitched out for a sec there. Anyway, so yeah, you usually take your outputs out of the blocks. You can take them out of anywhere. So this is a very, very old design. Admittedly, it was before repeaters were in the game, but I thought I might mention it just because I'm nostalgic like that. So we'll now move on to the very, very more modern designs. This is a repeater clock you see in front of you here. It's just 2 repeaters joined like this. All you need to do is send a very quick pulse to it. So, well, if you send a full pulse and not do it, you'll see, not send a quick pulse, you'll just kind of lock the repeaters, they'll power each other. But if you do a quick pulse, if we can get it here. Oh, too quick. There we go. And you can see we've got this fast pulse. I think if we extend it, you can see they lock up because the pulse is too fast for the 2-tick repeater. A more reliable way to do this is just use a simple pulse generator here. We hit this. We've sent a pulse to this, and you can see we've got our cycling motion. I think you can actually increase the length of this. So unlike the 5 clock, you can actually increase the length of this, but I believe you need to set the repeaters first. So we do that, yeah, you can see we've got the cycling motion. We can take our input out of anywhere, and yeah, the advantage for this one is you can lengthen or shorten the clock. So yeah, it's much more variable than the 5 clock design. The only unfortunate thing is that I think if you relog, I'm not sure if this still works, but from my experience, when you relog, this clock breaks and you have to reset it. So It's not the best design to use. The actual best designs to use are these two here, and these were obviously introduced. You can see the comparators. These two designs were introduced in the Redstone update, and they're currently, I will call, the best two clock designs and the most often used. They each have their different uses, and I'll go through them both. So what we have here is a comparator, and it's feeding back into the side of itself. So if you remember back to over there with the the basics episode, you will know that a comparator in subtract mode works very, very differently. It's very, very unique. Basically, a comparator in subtract mode, this is not in subtract mode yet, because when we put it in subtract mode, we're going to see the clock effect. When we switch this repeater, we right click it, not repeater, comparator, I apologize. It will subtract the back, it will take the number, the power level coming in the back and subtract it from the side and output that out to the front. So we've got 15 here because of the redstone block. You can also use a torch. It's completely irrelevant. We got 15 and it outputs 15 here, 14, 13. So it's 15 minus 13. So when we put this in subtract mode, it will actually output a signal of 2. But then this comparator will realize it's gone 2, then it'll go 1, and then it'll go 0. So the comparator will actually realize, wait a minute, I'm actually getting no signal in from the side now. So what does it do when it gets no signal in from the side? It says, oh, I've got to repeat the same 15 out the front, and that's what it does, and it repeats the cycle. So it goes 15, 14, 13, and you can see 15 minus 13 is once again 2, and so on and so forth. It repeats. So what we get is this flashing effect. Now, basically what it's doing is going between those two states, and you get this extremely fast clock effect. And this is very, very useful. The problem is you can only put repeaters off certain ways. You can see these repeaters are too quick to function. But actually, I think this orientation works only with a 1 repeater. It's a really weird glitch. If you put them facing this way, it doesn't work. But if you put them facing... Ooh, I thought it was direction-based, but apparently it only works on this block. So there you go. If you want to take a repeater output, you have to go from that block. However, these are more useful if you use a repeater in them. Repeater there, run this back round, subtract mode, and you can see we're getting the clock effect exactly the same as before. The advantage of this, you can take it from anywhere, and you can actually increase this delay, and you see we've got a slower clock. You can add, can you add a repeater in here? I want to check that. Yes, you can. So you can add as many repeaters as you want to get a slower and slower clock. So this is just it's strictly better than using any repeater design here, because this has all the functionalities and it won't reset when you reload your world. I'm pretty sure generally. So anyway, I'll leave that there. Our last clock is very, very basic. It is the hopper clock. All you have is 2 hoppers running into each other. So how you do that, I'll show you. You just place a hopper down, shift click, place a hopper, and then you break the first hopper, shift click, place the first hopper. So you can see they're running into each other. You drop any item in there, and you can see it's going in and out of these 2 hoppers. They're just passing it between each other, and you can see both of these comparators are lining up. And yep, just chuck a repeater there, and you've got yourself a clock design. Unfortunately, this is not a variable clock, so it will only run at 1 speed only. But you can take it out of any hopper, any direction, and it is a lot more compact than this design, and much easier if you want to fit it into... Say if you want to do a really compact design, this is sometimes a better choice. So it's really up to you, but that is your short explanation on clocks. We will now move on to edge triggers. So if you've been following the series along the way, you have almost certainly heard me mention the word edge trigger in some form or another. They are very important in double extenders. I would have mentioned them there. I possibly would have mentioned them in my 2x2 doors episode. Basically, they're used in a lot, maybe in the block stoppers episode, I'm not quite sure, but I would have definitely mentioned them in the double extenders episode, which is here. So edge triggers, what are they? Well, an edge is defined in electronics. It's called a rising edge or a falling edge. Rising edge is when you turn, so I'll grab this lever just for example. Rising edge is when you turn something on like that. So when this goes from off to on, so in binary that would be 0 to 1. If you don't understand that, don't worry too much. But basically when something turns off to on, that is called the rising edge. So it's the rising edge of the pulse. And when something goes from on to off, that's called the falling edge. So say when you turn a lever like that, that's defined as the falling edge. So with those definitions, we can actually define some different edge triggers. Edge triggers are something that will send a single pulse on either the rising or falling edge, or as we'll say over here, both. So what we're going to do here, this is a variable edge trigger. It is a very, very fairly well used design. I say it's very well used because I use it all the time personally, but that doesn't mean everyone uses it. And basically we vary these repeaters to make it a falling or rising edge trigger. So to make a rising edge trigger, we've got this. We're obviously activating this piston. We're going to send a pulse. So if we do that, we can see the pulse goes through. I've explained this in plenty of other episodes, but this is the formal explanation. So basically what it's doing is it's sending a pulse through this block. Then one tick later, this piston starts to extend. So we get exactly, I think it's exactly one tick, a one tick pulse, or maybe 2 ticks with the piston quirks. So you can see we're getting the pulse there, and you'll notice we actually get this on the rising edge. So we go this, you can see it's activating on the rising edge. However, this is only when this repeater is higher than this repeater. What happens the other way around? If we send them both back to 1, we're actually going to increase this delay. So what happens on the rising edge? Well, it goes to this first, so our piston starts extending first this time instead of last, and then the pulse goes through here. It's got no block to go through, so theoretically nothing should happen, and that's exactly what we get because it's far too slow. In fact, if we increase that delay just to visualize it more, and you can see it activated there, but we'll get to that. You can see the piston's extended way before this pulse can get here. But on the falling edge, so when we turn this off, you can see the block goes back to the position, and this pulse is slow enough to actually push a pulse through it and activate our lamp. So when we turn the lever on, no pulse. When we turn it off, we get a pulse. So this is defined as a falling edge trigger because it's only when the lever turns off. And I believe we use this over in, we actually use this over here in our double extender. You can see when we turn the lever on, you can see this thing back here doesn't activate, but only when we turn it off does the pulse come through the back there. Go watch the double extenders episode if you want a bit of a closer explanation on that. And actually this is the design we used, so we can see this is also an edge trigger. It's just more commonly used as a pulse generator. That's what I use it as anyway. You can see we only get a pulse when we turn the lever on, as you can see. How we get it the other way around? Well, all we have to do is invert the signal like this. So when we turn the lever on, no signal. When we turn the lever off, you can see we get a signal. So on, no signal, off, we get a signal. So that's the only way. It actually works for this as well. If we actually set it so it's a rising edge trigger, as you can see there, if we just put a torch here, we can see it's now a falling edge trigger. So if you want a quick way to convert your rising edge triggers to falling edge triggers, just chuck a torch in the front. So the last thing I've got to show you here is called, this is also an edge trigger in this setup. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the lever on. We can see we get a pulse on the rising edge, but on the falling edge, I don't believe, no, we don't get a pulse. So actually what's happening here is this is activating, this redstone wire is activating, and watch this block here, and I'll add a lever here. You can actually see this is activating, and then this block pushes out to cut the wire is the formal definition. So obviously redstone can't pass through the solid block here. So it cuts the wire and therefore cuts the signal. So we'll see that again. So you can see the wire got cut there. But we can actually use a bit of a quirk with a repeater. Now, because pistons take 2 ticks to extend, so we're going to get a very quick pulse because this is only 1 tick. So we'll get a 1 tick pulse on the rising edge. And we can see we get a pulse on the rising edge, which is we expect because this is 1 tick, pistons take 2 ticks to extend. But on the falling edge, what happens? We also get a pulse. Now this is because pistons start to extend instantaneously. They start to extend instantaneously. And even when the block is, say, halfway done retracting, this wire will be uncut and therefore allow a pulse through. So it's just a bit of a quirk with a piston. Now you see, when we turn it on, we get a pulse, and when we turn it off, we also get a pulse. So this is both a rising and falling edge trigger. It's just defined as a multi-edge trigger or a dual edge trigger, whatever terminology you really want to use. It's just a dual edge trigger, so we get a single pulse on both the rising and falling edge. So that's the distinction. One pulse there and one pulse there. And there's not as many uses for these, but I'm sure you can find a use for them. So that concludes edge triggers. So that just about wraps it up for clocks and edge triggers. And I hope it was a bit of a quicker episode. That's pretty much what I was going for. And even though I went through these quickly, I felt I still should mention them because they are a fairly integral part of Redstone, even if, they're not that complicated and not that hard to understand. So I'm glad I covered them. They're done. Next episode is going to be a big one, guys. I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it because it is based on a very popular, and I mean very popular, Redstone build. So get hyped for that, guys. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching. Make sure, well downloaded in the description. Leave your comments, all that stuff. And I'll catch you next time, guys. See you later.